In this video, I'm not only going to talk to you about how you can appear more confident, but feel it too. But before I can do that, I need to give you some context and my story. For so many years, I struggled with being confident. I would walk into a room of people and be absolutely frozen in fear and convinced that they were all looking at me. And I felt so completely out of place everywhere I went. But over the years of being in business, getting jobs and pushing myself, I have learnt to become confident. As a kid, I wasn't considered particularly shy, but I was definitely awkward. I didn't really like being around lots of people. I kind of liked to be off in my own world, doing my own thing, making up my own little stories. But as I became an adult, I realised that maybe I was a bit shy and a bit nervous because I hated doing things like going into shops or speaking to new people, and even things like picking up the phone to make a doctor's appointment was so difficult. And the worst part was just any unknown situation. I remember I had this opportunity to go to Milton Keynes and have a go in a Formula One simulator. It was just something that was set up in the middle of the shopping centre, but I was so nervous. And I made myself sick just worrying about it. I was overthinking it. The whole day before, I did not sleep. I was thinking about silly things like, would I fit in the simulator? What shoes do I wear? What if I'm not very quick? What if people laugh at me? And I was just so nervous. And I'd love to hear from you if you've been in a similar situation. Let me know down in the comments. I know that so many other people have been in this kind of situation where they've been overthinking something. As it turned out, the simulator was fine. In fact, I had such a great time, and it definitely cemented my love for Formula One and motorsport, which then became my career. And I was also the third fastest, so I really had nothing to worry about. And also, no one cared what I was doing. Everyone was too busy focusing on their lap times. It was when I got my first proper job, not counting the really shitty sales jobs I had straight out of college, but when I got my first PR job, I realised that there had to be a new me. I couldn't be someone who was too nervous to go into a shop. I regularly had to interface with clients, manage events, and speak to people on the phone, and all of that was really, really nerve-wracking for me. In fact, I was so completely out of my depth, and all of my friends and family would ask me, how is the dream job going? And I never once said to them, I hate it, I'm so scared all of the time. I just pushed through, and I'm not saying that that is a great tactic. You should always speak to your family and friends about this kind of thing, but I felt like I just had to kind of push on. And ultimately, it worked for me. I started to pretend. So at all of those events where I was speaking to celebrities and VIPs, I just pretended that I was a confident person. It was almost as if I had some kind of alter ego. On the surface, I would be happily smiling, shaking hands, dealing with any problems that came up, directing guests, and making sure I was supporting my bosses in the best way possible. Nobody knew that I was absolutely dying inside. I hated every single moment of it, especially those first few events. But as I went on, so many people used to say to me how confident I was. And this was family and friends, new people that I was meeting. So many people would comment on that confidence that I had. Now, I found this really, really strange because I felt anything but confident. But I was proud of myself because I thought, you know what I'm doing? I am pretending to be a confident person. And that's a winner because I can get through these events, do my job well, impress people, and that was really all that mattered. After each event and after any other kind of scary situation, I was proud of myself that I got through. Then I had this massive realization. I thought to myself, at what point does pretending to be confident actually just become confident? Surely, if people were telling me that I was confident, that had to be the case. Did it really matter that I was nervous if no one could tell? So I guess the real question is confidence this outward thing that people perceive of us, or is it what we feel internally? Now, honestly, I'm not sure what the answer is. I still haven't figured that out. But what really mattered is that people thought I was confident, but the more I was kind of going through this character and this persona that was confident, or at least looked confident, I realized that suddenly it just happened. I would go into a new situation and suddenly I wasn't that nervous. But before I go into some tips and what faking confidence looks like, I want to tell you just one thing. The more I did this and the more that I pretended to be confident, the the more it became a reality. It became my truth. I pretended and acted so much that I got to the point where I was just confident. And I don't know when it happened. I can't tell you where in my career that switch was made, but at some point I became a confident person. I was building up this bank of experiences of going to new venues, meeting new people, shaking the hands of celebrities, and I kind of got to the point where it was all just water off a duck's back. It was normal for me, so there was no need to be nervous about it. By pretending to be confident, I gave myself the experience needed to understand more about different situations and what was needed of me, which meant there were none of the nerves of the unknown, which was always my biggest issue. It's also worth mentioning though that I continually tried to push myself. As soon as I realised that this confidence that I was projecting was something that I was learning and not necessarily feeling, it made me realise that actually I needed to keep pushing myself in order to get more confident. So I was looking at events and my job and all of the stuff that I was doing as an influencer at the time, and I thought, how can I push myself? How could I ride the wave of the confidence I'd built up from being in a fast-paced, high-pressure PR job? So here are some tips if you're wondering how you can be more confident. Number 1, consider the spotlight effect. Now this is the phenomena that you walk into a room and you think a spotlight is on you. You think that everybody is looking at you. Well, I can promise you that they're not. As much as we think that maybe we stand out, people are looking at us, that we don't belong somewhere, it's actually not true. People are so involved in their own thing, and perhaps even similar feelings to you, that they're not going to notice what you're doing. So when you next walk into a room and you feel like everyone's looking at you, remember the spotlight effect. They're too caught up in their own stuff to worry about what you're doing. And this is so true for anything. So making YouTube videos, being an influencer on Instagram, writing an article. People are not as bothered about the little things as you are, and you're always going to be way more self-critical than anyone else would be. At the first ever press event I went to in motorsport as a journalist, I walked into this room of people in a garage at Rockingham Race Circuit, and I was certain they were looking at me. They were thinking, who is this girl? What right does she have to be here? And I kind of just stood around really awkwardly. I didn't know anyone, and it was awful. I just kind of had my head in my phone the whole time, and I was so nervous about doing some driving on track and having to speak to people that I couldn't even network with other journalists who are typically very, very nice people and probably would have welcomed me with open arms had I said something. But I just kind of stood at the side of the room and I just felt awkward, like I was sticking out, like I was out of place. So I saw a group of chairs and I thought, right, you know what, I'm going to go sit down and I'm going to be able to relax. And I thought if I'm out of the way, I can just kind of look at my phone, I can wait for things to get started. So I sat down in this area where there were a ton of empty chairs. There wasn't really anyone there. Felt a bit better. That was until a whole group of racing drivers came in, sat down all around me, and a driver briefing started. Now this was in the same area that all of the journalists were kind of standing around, but I was the one that was sitting, in the driver briefing. So I'm kind of sitting there like, shit. I should not be here. What do I do? Do I get up? Am I in someone's seat? What do I do? Ended up just staying there because I thought it was going to be more obvious if I just got up and left. So I just kind of sat there, hung out, tried to pretend that I belonged there, and I was just there to get a closer view of what the driver briefing was like. But I was dying inside. I was so stressed, on the edge of tears. It was genuinely one of the most scary experiences of my life. But now, when I look back on it, and having done a ton of events like that where I've had to go to racetracks, drive a car, meet drivers, I realised that no one cared. Everyone was just listening to the driver briefing. No one was thinking about me sitting there in maybe slightly the wrong place. But also there were other people sitting around who also weren't involved in the driving. They weren't drivers. They were other journalists or other team members, and they were sitting in the same seats near me. Looking back on that event is actually quite stressful. I still feel those emotions that I felt back then, but I realised I was really, really suffering from this whole spotlight effect thing. I thought people were paying way more attention to me than they actually were. In fact, no one cared. So this brings me on to tip number 2. Push yourself. Mentioned this before, but it's so important that if you are keen on building your confidence, that you push yourself into those situations that do make you a bit nervous. If you're not putting yourself into situations that require a next level confidence, then you're not going to learn it. I was able to learn it because I just had to in my job. It was a necessity. But if you're not in a job that is particularly demanding or puts you in those situations, then you need to find them for yourself. So I think no matter what industry you're in, what your hobbies are, what you do for a living, there will probably be some situations and opportunities that come up that will push you, that will require confidence. So I always ask myself one thing: will I regret this if I don't do it? This has really helped me navigate those opportunities that come up that are terrifying. From press trips to live television, to going on the radio to talk about cars, to driving on track, driving nice cars, even driving through London. All of these opportunities, I looked at them and thought, they are so scary. I don't want to do them. I don't want to do this. But then I have to ask myself, is this an opportunity? Is this something that you want to do? Do you want to go on the BBC? Do you want to drive a car on track? Of course you do. I always had to ask myself, will I regret it if I turn it down? Now, there are of course some opportunities that are scary that I just don't want to do. So I've said no to bungee jumping. But for the most part, most opportunities that come my way, scary as hell. But I do them because I know that I will regret it if I say no. So this is a really good way to kind of measure what's appropriate for you and what situations you should be putting yourself in. Number 3, understand that you will always have nerves. Nerves don't just go away because you become more confident. So I just moderated a panel discussion for a big motorsport industry event. And I've done this so many times, but I was nervous. In fact, I was thinking about this all yesterday as I was prepping. I was maybe overthinking it a little bit, but I went in there and I absolutely smashed it. I did a great job. So it's okay to be nervous. Everyone is nervous going into any situation like that, especially if you need to perform on camera, speak to new people, go into a new situation. Nerves are absolutely fine. What happens with your nerves as you become more confident is they lessen. Early on, my nerves killed me. They made me overthink, overplan, get too deep into it, question everything and be really, really anxious. Now, my nerves are a force for good. Someone once said to me that if you're not nervous, you probably don't care enough. So for any situation where I think, wow, I'm not nervous, I'm quite excited about this. If I dig deep, I realize that, okay, yeah, maybe a little bit nervous, wouldn't necessarily tell everyone that, but I had nerves going into this big conference today, and that was fine. Tip 4 is that confidence is actually so much more than how you feel, it's how you react. During my first ever BBC radio interview, I must have spent about 4 or 5 hours planning. So I was talking about diesel cars and I sat down and I wrote down pretty much everything there was to know about diesel cars, their emissions, the particulates, all of this kind of stuff that just wasn't interesting or appropriate to a general local radio audience. So I did all of this prep, had all of these notes, I went into the live session, I sat down, got my notes out, didn't look at them once. That level of over-preparing was good for me in this situation, but I didn't need to do it to that level and I didn't need to spend that much time doing it for something that was only 5 minutes long and just a nice friendly chat about diesel cars on the radio. So now when I go into a BBC radio interview, I do a tiny bit of planning, but I do it on the day before I go in just to validate the information that I know, just to make sure it's timely and up to date. So although I would have come across the same level of confidence on both of those interviews, the second one shows real confidence because I was confident enough in my own abilities to talk about something as an expert. So as you're building your confidence, think about this. Think about how you're preparing and what you're doing, let's say the night before a big event or something big that's happening in your life. So just bear that in mind. If you want to push yourself, then try and think about taking a step back from that over planning or those other nervous things that go into doing something new. And next up, breathe. If you ever find yourself getting flustered or your nerves get the better of you, just take a deep breath. It's just a wonderful thing for helping you to kind of calm down, recenter yourself and work out what you're going to do or say next. And you know what? If you need to pop to the loo and just have a moment of that's fine too. You can go and do that. Pop to the loo, take a moment to yourself, a few deep breaths, then get back to it with that outward-facing, confident persona that everyone thinks that you have and everyone thinks that you are feeling. I used all of these techniques to become a full-time freelance writer, and now I'm a television presenter, I'm a speaker, I'm a journalist. I get to drive cars for a living and travel around the world. I wouldn't have been able to do this had I not had the confidence to push myself and go after those opportunities that kept falling in my lap. If you're interested in a similar career, check out this video where I talk about how I became a freelance writer.